Elena Martinez stood in the massive chamber and felt very small. The room stretched high above her head with walls that seemed to glow with their own light. All around her, floating platforms held representatives from 47 different alien species. Some looked like giant insects. Others appeared as balls of light contained in crystal shells. A few reminded her of reptiles, but much larger and more frightening than any creature on Earth. They all stared down at her with expressions that clearly showed they did not think much of humans. She had prepared for this moment for 3 long years. Earth's government had chosen her carefully from thousands of candidates to represent humanity's request to join the Galactic Council. She had studied alien cultures and languages and protocols until she could recite them in her sleep. She had practiced her speech hundreds of times. Now all that preparation faced its ultimate test. The Velkari ambassador spoke first. His name was Thexkar, and he looked like a mantis the size of a small car. When he made sounds that passed for laughter among his species, his mandibles clicked together in a way that made Elena's skin crawl. "You ask us to accept humanity into the council? Your species only discovered faster than light traveled 200 years ago. You have no impressive military strength, and your technology is primitive at best. Tell us why we should waste our time with you." Elena kept her voice steady even though her heart pounded hard in her chest. "Ambassador, humanity may be young compared to your civilizations, but we have proven ourselves capable of great things. We have overcome countless challenges on our homeworld. We have shown courage and creativity and determination. We believe we can contribute meaningfully to the council." A hissing sound interrupted her. Chancellor Vexnor, a reptilian creature with scales that shimmered like oil on water, leaned forward on his platform. "Contribute? You barely understand the basics of galactic civilization. Your species emerged from a backward planet only recently. You are children playing at being adults." More aliens made sounds of agreement. Elena felt heat rising to her face but forced herself to remain calm. She had expected resistance, but the level of contempt in their voices surprised her. Then the Luminary Counselor spoke. This being appeared as pure energy trapped inside a crystal structure that constantly shifted colors. Its voice sounded like music, but the words carried no warmth. "We have examined your genetic records, Captain Martinez. Your personal lineage shows nothing remarkable. No warrior heritage, no noble bloodline, no distinction of any kind. Even among your own primitive species, you come from common stock." The words hit Elena harder than she expected. She had grown up believing that all humans had equal worth regardless of their family background. Earth had moved past the old ideas about bloodlines and inherited status, but apparently the rest of the galaxy had not. "With respect, Counselor, humanity does not measure a person's worth by their ancestry. We believe in judging people by their actions and achievements, not by who their parents were." The chamber erupted with sounds that Elena's translator identified as laughter from multiple species. The Xyloth representative, a blob-like creature named Corvex that constantly changed shape, pulsed with what appeared to be amusement. How wonderfully naive. "The universe runs on power and heritage, human. Your species possesses neither. You personally possess neither." Elena's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she kept them hidden behind her back. She would not give these aliens the satisfaction of seeing how much their words affected her. The High Arbiter called for silence. Zendros was an ancient being with 6 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. He had presided over the council for longer than some civilizations had existed. When he spoke, the other aliens quieted immediately. "The petition is denied. Humanity lacks the necessary qualifications for council membership. Furthermore, Captain Martinez, your genetic profile contains none of the markers we associate with leadership species. Return to your world and tell your leaders that perhaps in another 1,000 years, when humanity has matured and when you send us representatives with more distinguished backgrounds, we may reconsider." Elena felt as if she had been slapped. 3 years of work dismissed in moments. Not just her work, but Earth's hopes of joining the galactic community. "You are making a mistake. You do not understand what humanity is capable of." "We understand perfectly," Thexkar said with another click of his mandibles. "We have complete access to your historical and genetic databases. Your species is predictable and limited and frankly disappointing. This meeting is over." The platforms began to move as the alien representatives prepared to leave. Elena stood alone on the petitioner's platform, feeling the weight of failure crushing down on her. She had failed Earth. She had failed her species. And worst of all, They had judged her personally as being too common, too ordinary, too unremarkable to even be worth their time. Most of the aliens had already left when an elderly figure approached her. Pelthar was an Archon, a species known for their long lives and dedication to preserving knowledge. His 3 eyes regarded her with something that might have been sympathy. Do not take their words too personally, Captain. The Council has grown arrogant over the millennia. Elena looked up at him. They judged me based on my family history. They did not care about anything I have accomplished or what I might be capable of. They just saw that my ancestors were not kings or warriors and dismissed me. Pelthar's head tilted to one side in a gesture of curiosity. Martinez, that is your family name, correct? Yes, why does that matter? The archive keeper's eyes widened slightly. Tell me, Captain, how far back have you traced your family line? Elena shrugged. A few generations. My family kept some records, but nothing extraordinary. Just normal people living normal lives. Why are you asking me this? Because Martinez is not a common name in galactic records. In fact, it appears in only one other place in all the archives I maintain. Pelthar paused and seemed to be making a decision. Come with me, Captain. There is something in the restricted section of the archives that you need to see. Something that the Council either does not know or has chosen to forget. Something that concerns your family directly. Elena felt confusion mixing with her disappointment. What are you talking about? My family has no connection to galactic history. We are from Earth. We have never left our homeworld until my generation. That is what your recent records show, yes, Pelthar said carefully. But the archives go back much further than Earth's written history. Much further indeed. Please come with me. What I have to show you will change everything you think you know about your heritage and about why the Council's treatment of you today was not just insulting, but profoundly ironic. Elena hesitated. Part of her wanted to return to her ship and report her failure to Earth's government. But curiosity won out over despair. All right, show me these archives. But I do not understand what you think you will find. You will understand soon enough, Pelthar said. And when you do, I suspect you will want to speak with the Council again. But this time you will not be asking for their acceptance. You will be demanding their respect. They walked through corridors that seemed to exist outside normal space. The archives stretched in all directions, endless rows of data crystals glowing with stored information. Each crystal contained the complete history of a world or species. Elena followed the archive keeper deeper into this repository of galactic memory, wondering what secrets about her family could possibly be hidden here. She came from ordinary people. Her parents had been teachers. Her grandparents had been farmers. There was nothing remarkable about the Martinez family line. Nothing that could possibly interest the Galactic Council or change their minds about humanity's petition. But Pelthar seemed very certain about whatever he wanted to show her. And the way he had reacted to her family name suggested that he knew something important, something that even she did not know about her own heritage. The Galactic Archives existed in a place that hurt Elena's mind to think about too carefully. Pelthar had explained that it was a pocket dimension, created by beings called the Ancients who had vanished millions of years ago. The archives preserved the history of every civilization that had ever reached for the stars. Row after row of crystalline storage devices stretched into infinity, each one glowing softly with the memories of worlds and species. Elena followed the archive keeper through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked. The lighting came from everywhere and nowhere at once. After what felt like hours but might have been minutes, Pelthar stopped before a section that looked different from the rest. The crystals here were darker, sealed behind a barrier of shimmering energy. This is the restricted section, Pelthar said quietly. The Council has deemed the information stored here too dangerous or too disturbing for general access. Very few beings have the authority to enter this area. I am one of them. What does this have to do with my family? Elena asked. She still could not imagine what connection her ordinary Earth family could have to secrets deemed too dangerous for the galaxy to know. Pelthar placed his hand on the energy barrier, and it dissolved like smoke. 3,000 years ago, there was a war unlike any other in galactic history. Not a small conflict between neighboring systems, but a war that consumed nearly every inhabited world. The Council rarely speaks of this war. They have erased most records of it from public access. I have never heard of such a war, Elena said. Very few have. The Council prefers it that way. They call it the Great Humiliation. Pelthar led her deeper into the restricted area until they reached a massive crystal that pulsed with deep red light. They were conquered, you see. Every species that now sits on the council was defeated and brought to its knees by a single force. A single empire. Elena's mouth went dry. What empire could possibly conquer the entire galaxy? Watch, Pelthar said and activated the crystal. Holographic images filled the air around them. Elena saw space battles on a scale that defied comprehension, thousands of ships engaged in combat, weapons tearing through the void, entire fleets destroyed in moments. But what caught her attention was the design of some of the ships. They looked primitive compared to modern vessels, but their basic configuration was unmistakable. She had seen similar designs in Earth's museums. Those are human ships, she whispered. Correct, Pelthar said, but not from your Earth, not exactly. Those ships belong to the first human empire. 3,000 years ago, humanity did not come to the stars as explorers seeking peace. They came as conquerors seeking dominion, and they were led by a military genius whose tactical brilliance has never been matched. His name was Marcus Martinez. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Elena grabbed onto a nearby pillar to steady herself. That is impossible. Human civilization on Earth has existed for thousands of years, but we only achieved space travel recently. How could there have been a human empire 3,000 years ago? Pelthar manipulated the holographic display, showing more images. Humanity is older than your planet's current civilization knows. 20,000 years ago, a colony fleet left Earth carrying thousands of people. They were fleeing some catastrophe that your modern historians have no record of. These colonists eventually settled on a world they named Nueva Terra. From that world, they built an empire that would eventually span 200 star systems. The holographic images continued to unfold. Elena saw human soldiers in advanced armor fighting against Velkari warriors. She saw human diplomats negotiating with Saurian leaders. And again she saw one face appearing in the historical records. A man with strong features, intense eyes, and an expression of absolute confidence. Marcus Martinez, Pelthar said, highlighting the figure. The conqueror. The man who unified the galaxy under human rule. The man who forced every species on the current council to swear oaths of submission and pay tribute to humanity. Elena stared at the face in the hologram. The resemblance to her own features was startling. The same jawline, the same shape of the eyes, even the same way of holding his head when facing a challenge. He cannot be my ancestor. The timeline makes no sense. It makes perfect sense when you understand what happened, Pelthar said. He pulled up genetic data displayed in formats that Elena only partially understood. The first human empire lasted for 800 years. Marcus Martinez ruled for only 60 years before he died of old age. His successors were not as skilled as he was. They became tyrants where he had been a stern but occasionally fair ruler. The empire began to crack. Internal rebellions weakened human control. The conquered species saw their opportunity. More holographic images showed the collapse. Coordinated uprisings across hundreds of worlds. Human fleets destroyed in ambushes. Entire planets burned. 2,000 years ago, the last stronghold of the first human empire fell. The council species hunted down the surviving humans with ruthless efficiency. They wanted to ensure that humanity could never threaten them again. But some escaped, Elena said quietly, beginning to understand, yes. Marcus Martinez's youngest daughter, Carla Martinez, fled with a small group of loyal followers. They destroyed their advanced technology to avoid detection and sought refuge on a primitive world far from the galactic core, a world where humans already lived but had not yet developed advanced civilization. Earth, Elena breathed. Exactly. They arrived 6,000 years ago during what your historians call the Stone Age. They had no choice but to hide their true origins and blend in with the native population. Over generations, their advanced knowledge faded into myth and legend. But their genes persisted. Their bloodline continued. Pelthar displayed 2 genetic sequences side by side. This is Marcus Martinez's genetic profile, preserved in our archives from tissue samples taken during treaty negotiations. And this is your genetic profile, taken from the scans you submitted with your council application. The match is undeniable. You are his direct descendant, Captain Elena Martinez. The council mocked your lineage today, never realizing they were insulting the bloodline of the only being who ever conquered them all. Elena felt like she could not breathe. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. This is insane. Why did the council not know? Surely they would have checked. They checked human records from Earth, which only extend back a few thousand years. They never thought to search the restricted archives. Why would they? As far as they knew, humans were a young species from a backwater world. They had no reason to suspect that humanity had once ruled the entire galaxy. The Council's arrogance blinded them to the truth. Pelthar continued showing her historical records, battle after battle where Marcus Martinez had outwitted and defeated alien forces that should have crushed him. Treaties signed under duress where proud alien civilizations swore loyalty to human authority. The signing of the Treaty of Submission where 47 species formally acknowledged human supremacy. Your ancestor was extraordinary, Pelthar said with genuine admiration in his voice. He did not just win through superior firepower, though his fleets were formidable. He understood strategy on a level that the alien species could not match. He studied his enemies, learned their weaknesses, exploited their cultural blind spots. The Velkari relied on rigid hierarchies, so he assassinated their command structure and left them paralyzed. The Saurians valued honor above all, so he manipulated them into accepting unfavorable terms rather than face shame. The Luminari prided themselves on logic, so he trapped them with their own protocols. How long did his conquest take? Helena asked, still trying to absorb the magnitude of what she was learning. 30 years. In 3 decades, Marcus Martinez went from leading a small human colony to ruling the entire known galaxy. No being before or since has accomplished anything comparable. Elena stared at the holographic images floating around her. This was her heritage. This was the bloodline that the Council had dismissed as common and unremarkable. She came from the family of the greatest conqueror the galaxy had ever known. The same Council members who had mocked her today were the descendants of the species her ancestor had defeated and subjugated. What do I do with this information? Elena asked quietly. Pelthar's 3 eyes fixed on her intently. That is your decision to make. You could reveal it and watch the Council descend into chaos. You could keep it secret and return to Earth with their rejection. Or you could use it. Use it how? The Treaty of Submission was never officially dissolved. When the first human empire fell, the treaty simply became unenforceable due to lack of human power. But legally, under galactic law, it remains valid. Every species on the Council is still technically subject to the authority of the Martinez bloodline. Your bloodline? Elena's eyes widened in shock. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. Marcus Martinez included a clause in the treaty that would recognize any proven descendant as the rightful ruler of the Galactic Empire. It was his way of ensuring his family would always have a legal claim to power. The Council buried this knowledge, but the treaty remains binding. You, Captain Elena Martinez, are the legal heir to an empire that conquered the galaxy. Elena spent 3 days in the Galactic Archives, absorbing information that changed everything she thought she knew about humanity and herself. Pelthar gave her access to files that no human had seen in thousands of years. She watched recordings of Marcus Martinez addressing his troops before major battles. She read his personal journals where he documented his strategies and his thoughts about the future. She studied the complete history of the first human empire from its rise to its catastrophic fall. The more she learned, the more complicated her feelings became. Marcus Martinez had not been a simple villain or hero. He had been a man shaped by desperate circumstances. The records showed that humanity's first contacts with alien civilizations had been violent. The Velkari had tried to enslave human colony ships. The Saurians had declared humans to be prey animals fit only for hunting. The Xyloth had attempted to absorb human worlds into their collective consciousness by force. He fought back because he had no choice, Elena said, as she reviewed footage of the Battle of Proxima Station. Marcus Martinez's small fleet had faced a Velkari armada 3 times its size and somehow achieved total victory. He did more than fight back, Pelthar said. He learned something that the alien species had forgotten. They had been at peace for thousands of years. Their military forces existed more for ceremony than for actual combat. Their tactics had become predictable. Meanwhile, humanity had spent its entire history at war. Your ancestor understood conflict in ways that the aliens could not comprehend. Elena watched as the historical records unfolded. Marcus Martinez had not just defeated his enemies. He had studied them completely. He learned their languages, their customs, their psychological weaknesses. When he attacked, he did not just destroy their fleets. He shattered their confidence and their sense of superiority. The Velkari had believed their rigid command structure made them invincible. Martinez proved them wrong by assassinating key leaders and watching their forces collapse into confusion. The Saurians had thought their honor code gave them strength. Martinez used that code against them, trapping them in situations where surrender was less shameful than continued resistance. The Luminari had trusted in their superior logic. Martinez showed them that sometimes emotion and unpredictability defeated logic. Within 30 years, every major species in the galaxy had submitted to human authority. The Treaty of Submission formalized what military force had already established. 47 species swore loyalty to Marcus Martinez and agreed to pay tribute to the human empire. What kind of ruler was he? Elena asked. The records show the conquest, but what happened after? Pelthar pulled up different files showing the administration of the empire. He was pragmatic. He allowed conquered species to keep their own governments and customs as long as they paid tribute and obeyed human authority. He could be merciful when mercy served his purposes, and ruthless when ruthlessness was needed. He built an empire that functioned efficiently for his lifetime. But it fell apart after he died, Elena observed. Yes, his children and grandchildren lacked his abilities. They became cruel where he had been firm. They demanded more tribute and gave less in return. They turned the empire from a system that worked into a system that oppressed. Rebellions started. Human leaders responded with increasing brutality. The empire fractured and eventually collapsed in civil war. Elena watched footage of the empire's final years. Human fleets fighting each other while conquered species saw their opportunity for revenge. The coordinated uprising that destroyed human worlds one by one. The desperate last stands as humanity's empire crumbled. The footage was difficult to watch, but she forced herself to see it all. The council species hunted down the survivors, Pelthar said quietly. They wanted to ensure humanity could never threaten them again. They destroyed every human world they could find. They executed anyone with Martinez blood. But Carla Martinez escaped with a small group of followers. She was Marcus Martinez's youngest daughter, and she possessed some of her father's intelligence. The record showed Carla's desperate flight across the galaxy, always one step ahead of the forces hunting her. She and her followers eventually reached Earth, a primitive world far from the galactic core where humans already lived, but had not yet developed advanced technology. She made a choice, Pelthar said. She could try to rebuild human power and potentially doom her people to extinction. Or she could hide. She chose to hide. They destroyed their ships and their advanced technology. They scattered among Earth's population and over generations. Their true origins faded into forgotten history. But the genetic markers remained, Elena said. Yes. Certain genetic sequences unique to the Martinez bloodline persisted through thousands of years and hundreds of generations. Those markers exist in your DNA, Captain. They prove beyond any doubt that you are Marcus Martinez's direct descendant. Elena looked at the genetic data displayed before her. The evidence was undeniable. She carried the blood of the galaxy's greatest conqueror. The Council had mocked her heritage without knowing they were insulting the one bloodline they feared above all others. I need to tell them, Elena said. Pelthar regarded her carefully. That is a significant decision. Once you reveal this truth, you cannot take it back. The Council will react strongly. Some will be frightened. Some will be angry. Some may even want to eliminate you to prevent any possibility of you claiming your inheritance. I understand the risks, but they dismissed humanity's petition based on ignorance and prejudice. They judged me personally as being too common to deserve their respect. They need to know the truth. They need to understand that their arrogance blinded them to reality. And what will you do with your claim? Pelthar asked. The Treaty of Submission technically gives you legal authority over every species on the Council. Will you invoke the treaty? Will you demand that they submit to you as their ancestors submitted to Marcus Martinez? Elna thought carefully about her answer. She had spent 3 days learning about her ancestors' empire. She had seen its rise and its fall. She understood now why it had failed. Power gained through conquest alone could not be maintained. Marcus Martinez had built an empire on military strength, but military strength faded when challenged by superior numbers and time. No, Elena said finally. I will not demand submission. That is not who I am, and that is not who humanity is anymore. We have learned from history. We understand that empires built on conquest eventually crumble. We want partnership, not dominion. Then what do you hope to achieve? Pelthar asked. I want respect. I want the Council to understand that they misjudged humanity completely. I want them to reconsider their decision based on facts rather than assumptions. And I want them to apologize for their treatment of me and my species. Pelthar's 3 eyes showed something that might have been approval. That is a more modest goal than your ancestor would have pursued. But perhaps it is a wiser one. How do you intend to proceed? I will request another hearing. I will present the evidence you have shown me. I will prove my heritage and reveal the history they have tried to forget. And then I will give them a choice. They can acknowledge their error and grant humanity the respect we deserve, or I can invoke the Treaty of Submission, and they can explain to their people why they are legally bound to obey a human they dismissed as too common to matter. That is a dangerous gambit, Pelthar warned. The Council does not respond well to threats. I am not threatening them. I am offering them an opportunity to do the right thing. If they choose to reject that opportunity, then the consequences are their own responsibility. Elena stood up and felt a new sense of purpose flowing through her. She was no longer just a human captain seeking acceptance from superior civilizations. She was the heir to an empire. She was the descendant of Marcus Martinez, and she would make the Council see the truth. Will you help me? She asked Pelthar. The ancient archive keeper was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I will. The Council has grown complacent and arrogant. They need to be reminded that they are not infallible, and I'm curious to see how they react when they learn that the woman they mocked carries the blood of their greatest nightmare. Then let us prepare, Elena said. I want the evidence organized and verified. I want genetic proof that cannot be disputed. I want historical records that show the complete truth. And I want to present it all in a way that follows proper Council protocols. If we do this, we do it correctly. Over the next 2 days, Elena and Pelthar worked together to compile an irrefutable case. They gathered genetic data, historical records, treaty documents, and military reports. They organized everything according to Council legal standards. By the time they finished, they had built a presentation that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Pelthar used his authority as archive keeper to request an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The request cited critical historical evidence relevant to humanity's application. The Council members, more curious than concerned, agreed to reconvene. They expected the archive keeper to present some minor detail they had overlooked. They had no idea what was coming. 3 days after Elena's discovery, she stood once again before the assembled council. This time she felt completely different. She was not a petitioner begging for acceptance. She was the heir to an empire that had conquered every species in this chamber. That knowledge changed everything about how she carried herself. High Arbiter Zendros looked down at her with barely hidden annoyance. Archive Keeper Pelthar, you have requested this emergency session on behalf of the human petitioner whose application we already denied. What possible new evidence could be relevant? Pelthar stepped forward and bowed with perfect formality. High Arbiter, honored council members, I have uncovered information that fundamentally alters the nature of this petition. With your permission, I will present historical records from the restricted archives. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Ambassador Thexkar clicked his mandibles sharply. The restricted archives? What relevance could ancient history possibly have to humanity's application? Complete relevance, Pelthar said calmly. He activated the holographic projector. 3,000 years ago, this council faced its greatest crisis. I will now show you the complete, unredacted history of the First Human Empire and the Conquest Wars. The chamber erupted with protests as holographic images filled the space. Elena watched the council members react as scenes of human fleets appeared, as battles unfolded, as their ancestors were defeated again and again by forces bearing human insignia. Chancellor Vexnor hissed loudly. Stop this immediately. These records are sealed. They are sealed because you wish to forget, Pelthar replied without stopping the presentation. But council law requires that all relevant historical evidence must be presented when it pertains to official proceedings. This evidence is directly relevant. The holographic display showed Marcus Martinez addressing his commanders before a crucial battle. Pelthar's voice carried clearly over the noise. This is Marcus Martinez, founder of the First Human Empire. He conquered every species represented in this chamber. He forced your ancestors to swear oaths of submission and pay tribute to human authority. Chaos filled the council chamber. Representatives from multiple species shouted in various languages. demanding the presentation stop, calling for Pelthar's removal, denying the validity of the records. Elena stood silently and watched them panic. They knew the truth now. They understood what their arrogance had blinded them to. High Arbiter Zendra struck his gavel repeatedly until the sound waves it produced forced everyone into silence. This is highly irregular, Archive Keeper. Even if these events occurred, they were thousands of years ago. They have no bearing on the current situation. They have every bearing, Elena said, stepping forward. Her voice was strong and clear. When I stood before, you mocked my lineage. You called it common and unremarkable. You said I lacked distinguished heritage. You were wrong. Pelthar displayed the genetic evidence on screens visible throughout the chamber. Captain Elena Martinez is the direct descendant of Marcus Martinez. The genetic proof is absolute. The family line can be traced without interruption from the Conqueror to this woman standing before you. The silence that followed felt like the entire galaxy holding its breath. Every alien representative stared at Elena with new eyes. Eyes that showed fear and shock and disbelief. Elena continued. You judged me and my entire species based on incomplete information and prejudice. You assumed we were insignificant because our recent history showed no great achievements. You never thought to look deeper. You never imagined that humanity had already reached for the stars once before and had conquered you all in the process. This is impossible, Thexkar said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The first human empire fell 2,000 years ago. All Martinez descendants were eliminated. Not all, Elena said. My ancestor Carla Martinez escaped to Earth with loyal followers. They hid among Earth's primitive population, and over generations their true origins were forgotten. But the bloodline persisted. I am the proof. The luminary counselor pulsed rapidly with what Elena's translator identified as extreme agitation. Even if your claim is true, it changes nothing. The first human empire is gone. Its treaties are meaningless now. Actually, Pelthar said, pulling up legal documents that appeared on every screen. The Treaty of Submission contains a very specific clause. I will read it now. This treaty shall remain in force in perpetuity, binding all signatory species to recognize the authority of Marcus Martinez and his legitimate heirs, should any such heir prove their bloodline and claim their birthright. The chamber fell silent again. Elena watched as the implications sank in. Several council members began consulting with legal advisors through private channels. Others sat frozen in shock. You cannot be serious, Chancellor Vexnor finally said. That treaty is ancient. No one would honor it now. Galactic law does not expire unless treaties are formally dissolved, Pelthar stated. This treaty was never dissolved. It remains legally binding. Captain Martinez has proven her bloodline. Under the terms of the treaty, every species in this chamber is technically still subject to her authority. High Arbiter Zendros looked genuinely shaken for the first time since Elena had met him. Even if the treaty is technically valid, enforcing it would be impossible. The balance of power has changed completely. I am not here to conquer anyone, Elena said firmly. I am not Marcus Martinez. I do not want an empire, but I do demand respect. Humanity came to you honestly, seeking partnership. You dismissed us based on arrogance and ignorance. You mocked my heritage without knowing what that heritage truly represented. What exactly do you want, Captain? Zendros asked quietly. Elena took a deep breath. I want humanity's petition reconsidered fairly. I want you to acknowledge that you were wrong to dismiss us so casually. I want Earth to have a voice in galactic affairs, and I want an apology for the way you treated me and my species. An apology? Thexkar said incredulously. You demand we apologize? Yes, you insulted me personally and dismissed my entire species based on prejudice. You judged my heritage as common and unremarkable when in fact my bloodline terrifies you. You owe us an acknowledgement of your error. Ambassador Thexkar rose from his platform. And if we refuse? Will you invoke this ancient treaty and attempt to reconquer the galaxy? Elena met his gaze without flinching. I could. According to the evidence Pelthar has presented, I have the legal right. The treaty gives me authority over every species here, but that is not who I am. That is not who humanity is anymore. We learned from our history. We know that empires built on force alone ultimately fail. We want partnership, not domination. She gestured at the holographic images still floating through the chamber. But understand this clearly. My ancestor conquered this galaxy with primitive ships and limited resources. He did it through intelligence, strategy, and an understanding of warfare that your species had forgotten. Imagine what humanity could do now if we chose that path. Imagine what I could do if I decided to fully embrace my inheritance. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Elena was offering peace, but she was also demonstrating strength. She was giving the Council a choice. The Council needs time to deliberate, High Arbiter Zendros said. This is an unprecedented situation. We must consult with legal experts and consider our options carefully. Take the time you need, Elena said, but understand that Earth deserves an answer. And that answer should reflect the reality of our situation, not your previous misconceptions. The Council called a recess, and Elena was escorted to a private waiting chamber. She sat down and felt the adrenaline that had been sustaining her begin to fade. She had done it. She had stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and made them acknowledge her, made them see humanity as something other than insignificant primitives. Pelthar entered the chamber and sat across from her. That was well done, Captain. You gave them no choice but to take you seriously. What do you think they will decide? Elena asked. They are frightened, Pelthar said with satisfaction. Frightened of you, frightened of what you represent, and frightened of their own past. Some will want to deny everything despite the evidence. Others will want to negotiate. A few may even consider accepting your treaty claim to try to control you through its terms. But they cannot dismiss you anymore. You have changed the entire dynamic of this situation. Elena nodded slowly. She had achieved her goal of making the Council see humanity differently, but she also knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever the Council decided, the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. The secret of the first human empire was out. The truth about the Martinez bloodline was revealed, and Elena stood at the center of it all, the heir to conquerors demanding not conquest but simple respect. The Galactic Council deliberated for 2 full days. Elena waited in the guest quarters provided for visiting dignitaries, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Pelthar visited regularly with updates about the chaotic discussions happening in the Council chambers. Legal experts from dozens of species were examining the Treaty of Submission from every possible angle, looking for loopholes or technicalities that might invalidate Elena's claim. So far, they had found nothing that could help them. On the morning of the 3rd day, Pelthar arrived with different news. The Council has reached a decision, but first they want to meet with you privately. A small delegation led by High Arbiter Zendros. No official recording, just a conversation. Elena felt her stomach tighten. Is that normal? No, but nothing about this situation is normal. I believe they want to negotiate directly with you, away from public scrutiny. Elena agreed and was led to a smaller chamber far less grand than the main council hall. High Arbiter Zendros waited there along with Ambassador Thexkar, Chancellor Vexnor, and the Luminary Counselor. The 4 most powerful beings in galactic government wanted to speak with her privately. Elena sat down across from them and waited. Captain Martinez, Zendros began, we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. Our legal experts have confirmed that the Treaty of Submission remains technically valid, and that your genetic claim is legitimate. If you invoke the treaty, we would be legally obligated to recognize your authority. Thexkar clicked his mandibles with obvious displeasure. However, we also must acknowledge reality. The military forces of the Council species vastly outnumber anything humanity currently possesses. Attempting to enforce the treaty through military action would result in Earth's destruction. Is that a threat? Elena asked calmly. It is a statement of fact, Vexnor said. We are trying to find a solution that avoids conflict while addressing the legitimate issues you have raised. The Luminary Counselor added, we need to understand what you truly want, Captain Martinez. Not what you stated publicly, but genuinely. What outcome would satisfy you? Elena had spent 2 days thinking about exactly this question. I want humanity to be treated as equals. I want Earth to have a voice in galactic decisions. I want the Council to stop viewing us as primitives and start seeing us as partners with valuable perspectives to offer. And personally, I want an acknowledgement that you were wrong in how you treated me at the initial hearing. An acknowledgement of error, Thexkar said flatly. You want us to admit publicly that we were wrong. Yes. You dismissed me and insulted my entire species based on incomplete information and prejudice. You judged my heritage as worthless when in fact it represents your greatest historical defeat. That deserves acknowledgement. Silence fell over the chamber. The council members exchanged glances, and Elena sensed they were communicating through private channels she could not access. Finally, Zendros spoke again. If we were to grant humanity full council membership with all associated rights and privileges, and if we were to formally acknowledge that our initial rejection was based on incomplete information, would you be willing to renounce any claim to authority under the Treaty of Submission? Elena had expected this. They wanted her to give up her legal leverage in exchange for what she had originally asked for. But she had spent time with Pelthar learning about negotiation tactics her ancestor had used. Marcus Martinez had understood that you should never accept the first offer. What about compensation? Elena asked. Compensation? Vexnor hissed. For what? The council coordinated the destruction of the first human empire 2,000 years ago. My ancestors lost everything. Entire worlds, advanced technology, centuries of accumulated knowledge all destroyed. Earth's humanity had to rebuild from nothing. We deserve compensation for that loss. The council members looked uncomfortable. Thexkar spoke angrily. That happened 2,000 years ago. None of us were responsible for those actions. But you benefit from them, Elena countered. The technology your species possess, the territories you control, much of it was taken from human worlds after the Empire fell. That is documented in the historical records. The council species divided former human territories among yourselves. You built your current civilization partially on the ruins of mine. Pelthar, who had remained silent in the corner, now spoke. She is correct. The archives contain detailed records of how council species claimed former human colonies and absorbed human technology into their own systems after the Empire's fall. Zendros sighed deeply. What form of compensation are you seeking? Technology transfer, Elena said. The council has kept humanity isolated, refusing to share advanced knowledge. I want that to change. I want access to medical technology that could eliminate diseases on Earth. I want energy systems that could end our dependence on fossil fuels. I want manufacturing techniques that could improve human quality of life. Not weapons technology, just the tools to help my species advance and catch up to yours. That is a substantial request, the Luminary Counselor noted. It is less than what was taken from us, Elena replied, and it is what partners do. They help each other grow stronger. More silence as the council members deliberated privately. Elena waited patiently. She knew she had put them in a difficult position. They wanted her to renounce her legal claim, but she was demanding real concessions in return. Zendros finally responded. We could negotiate a technology transfer agreement, implemented gradually over time with appropriate safeguards, but we would need absolute assurance that you will not invoke the Treaty of Submission in the future, not for yourself or for any future Martinez descendants. I will agree to that, Elena said, but this agreement must be binding on the council as well. Humanity must receive genuine full membership, not some inferior status. And the acknowledgement of your error must be public and official, not buried in diplomatic language. You want us to admit our mistake in front of the entire galaxy, Thexkar said. Yes, you humiliated me and my species publicly. You should acknowledge your error publicly. That is only fair. The council members communicated privately for several more minutes. Elena sat quietly and projected confidence she did not entirely feel. Everything depended on this negotiation. If she pushed too hard, they might refuse, and she would have to choose between backing down or invoking a treaty that could lead to war. If she accepted too little, she would fail Earth and betray the trust her government had placed in her. We need time to formalize a proposal, Zendros finally said. Give us until tomorrow. We will present terms that address your requirements. Elena stood. I will wait, but not indefinitely. Earth deserves a prompt answer. The next day, Elena was summoned to the main council chamber. This time the galleries were filled with observers from across the galaxy. Word had spread about the dramatic revelations, and beings from hundreds of species had come to witness what happened next. Elena walked to the petitioner's platform with her head held high. She was not the same person who had stood here days ago begging for acceptance. She was the heir to an empire, and she negotiated from strength. High Arbiter Zendros called the session to order, and his voice carried unusual gravity. Captain Elena Martinez, the council has completed its deliberations. We will now present our decision regarding both your original petition and the historical matters that have come to light. The chamber fell completely silent. Elena felt every alien eye watching her, but she stood steady and calm. Zendros continued. The Council acknowledges that you are the legitimate descendant of Marcus Martinez, and that the Treaty of Submission remains technically valid under galactic law. However, we also recognize that enforcing such an ancient treaty would serve no constructive purpose in the modern galaxy. He paused, and then spoke words that would change everything. The Galactic Council hereby grants full membership to humanity, effective immediately. Earth will hold a permanent seat with complete voting rights and all privileges accorded to Council species. Captain Martinez, you will serve as humanity's first representative if your government approves. Elena felt relief wash through her, but kept her expression neutral. Zendros was not finished. Furthermore, the Council formally acknowledges that our initial rejection of humanity's petition was based on incomplete information and represented a failure of proper investigation. We erred in our judgment of both humanity as a species and Captain Martinez as an individual. For this error, we offer our official apology. The word apology echoed through the chamber. An official apology from the Galactic Council was something that happened perhaps once in a millennium. Additionally, Zendros said, the Council agrees to a comprehensive technology transfer agreement with Earth. Over the next 50 standard years, humanity will receive access to medical, energy, and manufacturing technologies. This transfer will be managed by a joint committee to ensure proper integration and safety. He looked directly at Elena. In exchange for these provisions, we request that you formally renounce any claim to authority under the Treaty of Submission. For yourself and for all future descendants of your line, we ask that you allow that ancient treaty to finally become history, honored but no longer active. This was the moment. Everything came down to her next words. Elena thought about Marcus,